I want to read you the indictment. It's not long, and give you my overall thoughts. Chelsea Manning, formerly known as Bradley Manning, was an intelligence analyst in the United States Army who was deployed to Forward Operating Base Hammer in Iraq. Manning held a top-secret security clearance and signed a classified information non-disclosure agreement acknowledging that the unauthorized disclosure or retention or negligent handling of classified information could cause irreparable injury to the United States or be used to the advantage of a foreign nation. As I've already discussed, the only irreparable injury to the United States was exposing the crimes of the United States. Executive Order number 13526 and its predecessor orders defined the classification levels assigned to classified information. Under the executive order, information may be classified as secret if its unauthorized disclosure reasonably could be expected to cause serious damage to national security. Again, with the national security. Further, under the executive order, classified information can generally only be disclosed to those persons who have been granted an appropriate level of United States government security clearance and possess a need to know the classified information in connection to their official duties. Julian Paul Assange was the founder and leader of the WikiLeaks website. The WikiLeaks website publicly solicited submissions of classified, censored, and other restricted information. Assange, who did not possess a security clearance or need to know, was not authorized to receive classified information of the United States. Neither was the New York Times or the Washington Post when they released the Pentagon Papers and other classified information. The fact that that is an extradition indictment is baffling and scary, because that goes to the very heart of protected 100% freedom of the press. The press has a right to publish information that is classified. In or around January 2010 and May 2010, Manning downloaded 4 nearly complete databases from departments and agencies in the United States. Those databases contained approximately 90,000 Afghanistan war-related significant activity reports, 400,000 Iraq war-related significant activity reports, 800 Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs, and 250,000 U.S. Department of State cables. Many of these records were classified pursuant to Executive Order blah, 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 or its predecessor orders. Manning provided the records to agents of WikiLeaks so that WikiLeaks could publicly disclose them on its website. WikiLeaks publicly released the vast majority of the classified records on its website in 2010 and 2011. On or about March 8, 2010, Assange agreed to assist Manning in cracking a password stored on United States Department of Defense computers connected to the Secret Internet Protocol Network, a United States government network used for classified documents and communications as designated according to Executive Order number 13526 or its predecessor orders. What's really telling here, if you have firm evidence that Assange agreed to assist Manning, presumably you would have it in their chat logs, which I believe the government has. I believe Barack Obama's Department of Justice had their chat logs. I believe Trump's administration has it. If you have them, why is it on or about March 8th? Wouldn't you know the date that Assange allegedly agreed to assist Manning in cracking a password? Because, usually, if you have in writing somebody's conversations via text message, Instant Messenger, Facebook, you could scroll up and find the date. Pretty sure the United States Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon, the CIA, the FBI, I think they could figure out what date this crack the password agreement happened. But it's on or about March 8th. It's interesting that it's written that way. Manning, who had access to the computers in connection with her duties as an intelligence analyst, was also using the computers to download classified records to transmit to WikiLeaks. Armed regulations prohibited Manning from attempting to bypass or circumvent security mechanisms on government-provided information systems and from sharing from sharing personal accounts and authenticators such as passwords. The portion of the password Manning gave to Assange to crack was stored as a hash value in a computer file that was accessible only by users with administrative level privileges. Manning did not have administrative level privileges and used special software, namely a Linux operating system, to access the computer file and obtain the portion of the password provided to Assange. Cracking the password would have allowed Manning to log onto the computers under a username that did not belong to her. Such a measure would have made it more difficult for investigators to identify Manning as the source of disclosures of classified information. Prior to the formation of the password cracking agreement, Manning had already provided WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of classified records that she downloaded from departments and agencies of the United States, including the Afghanistan War-related significant activity reports and Iraq War-related significant activity reports. I think this is a very, very important part. Let me read that one more time. Prior to the formation of the password cracking agreement, Manning had already provided WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of classified records that she downloaded from departments and agencies of the United States, including the Afghanistan War-related significant activity reports and Iraq War-related significant activity reports. Why this is important? This isn't Julian Assange working from the onset, from the front of the race with Chelsea Manning to hack government systems and get that information out. If that were the case, I would agree Julian Assange was not operating as a journalist. He was part of the hacking. And whether the hacking is a righteous thing, whether the hacking is a noble thing, whether it is morally right, it's a crime. It is. But whistleblowers go into doing these things assessing that risk and coming to terms with the fact that they might face criminal penalties. But in the indictment, they're basically saying, oh, well, like, Chelsea Manning had already released hundreds of thousands of documents to Assange at the Times. So I don't know if they realize, but they kind of are working against themselves. Because this shows that Julian Assange was not a conspirator or a collaborator or working with Chelsea Manning pretty much from step one, but she had already given him a lot of information. Cracking the password would have allowed Manning to log onto the computers under a username that did not belong to her. Such a measure would have made it more difficult for investigators to identify Manning as the source of disclosures of classified information. Prior to the formation of the password cracking agreement, Manning had already provided WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of classified records that she downloaded from departments and agencies of the United States, including the Afghanistan War-related significant activity reports and Iraq War-related significant activity reports. I think I just read that to you twice. Sorry. At the time he entered into the agreement, Assange knew that Manning was providing WikiLeaks with classified records containing national defense information of the United States. Assange was knowingly receiving such classified records from Manning for the purpose of publicly disclosing them on the WikiLeaks website. Several different things there. Number one, again, this was not national defense documents. This was national crimes and global crimes that the United States perpetrated that Julian Assange received from Chelsea Manning. So they could dress it up as they dress up JFK and hiding those documents from his assassination, which was the CIA that was behind it. But it isn't national defense. It's hiding your crimes. Plain and simple. Secondly, the way I read this, and others that I very admire their brains, like Aaron Mate and others, the way I read this is they're basically saying that Assange, quote, tried to help Chelsea Manning in a crack password in an attempt to protect her identity. He wasn't, again, it's allegedly because I don't know what evidence they have that Julian Assange entered an agreement with Chelsea Manning to crack a password. They could say it in an indictment. I'd like the evidence. But what's really interesting here is they're basically saying that Julian Assange was working alongside or conspiring with Chelsea Manning to crack a password, not to gain more information, not to get access to more documents, not to, hack another agency's database, but to disguise her identity. It is the number one responsibility of a journalist, other than making sure your information is true, to make sure you don't reveal your source. As a journalist, you are taught, or you should just know instinctually, that I'd sooner go to jail than reveal a source. So, in this alleged computer hacking, password agreement, if Assange was helping her try to guess a password, it was in efforts to help protect his source, not to hack and get information himself. This indictment does not say that Julian Assange ever tried to gain a password or help Manning guess a password for the goal of trying to gain information, hack new information, get to files. It was to disguise his source's identity. For example, on March 7, 2010, Manning and Assange discussed the value of the Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs. And on March 8, 2010, before entering the password cracking agreement, they keep saying that, but I'd like the evidence. Manning told Assange that she was, quote, throwing everything she had on JTF Gitmo at Assange now. Manning also said, after this upload, that's all I really have got left. To which Assange replied, quote, curious eyes never run dry, in my experience. Following this, between March 28, 2010 and April 9, 2010, Manning used a United States Department of Defense computer to download the U.S. Department of State cables that WikiLeaks later released publicly. So right here, they are essentially trying to criminalize a journalist urging his source to get more. Any good journalist, whether it's classified information or not non-classified information. You run into sources who are scared. You run into sources who, for whatever reason, they work 3 jobs, or they're sick, or they're scared of the consequences, or whatever. Say this is all I could do. I can't do any more. And you as a journalist, sometimes, because a good journalist kind of gets obsessed on a certain story and getting more of the information out, sometimes you push them. Sometimes you push them too little. Sometimes you push them too much. But that's called a journalist pushing a source. Sometimes it's the other way around, and the source pushes the journalist to do more. Or to go back to his editor and convince the editor to run with X, Y, and Z. It's a two-way relationship. I've had sources of mine very unhappy with the final story that I published because they thought it was soft or whatever. And I had to say, this is all I could get printed. My editor took X, Y, and Z out. And they were pissed off and pushed me on the next story to do more. I've had sources personally ask me to help them with everything from, getting the word out to helping them with their electric bill. But this indictment basically is drawing a cause and effect. Julian Assange says to Chelsea Manning, curious eyes never run dry in my experience, basically trying to say to her, keep going, keep digging. And that led her to use a United States Department of Defense computer to download the U.S. Department of State's cables that WikiLeaks later released publicly. This is a brazen attempt to criminalize normal journalistic procedure. And let's call it what it is. This is Mike Pompeo, who as CIA director, now he's Secretary of State, put as one of his number one priorities to extradite Julian Assange to the United States. This was Jeff Klansman Sessions, who was obsessed with getting Assange. Now he's gone. This is current Attorney General William Barr, and this is Trump, who, frankly, doesn't really care. He says, oh, the warmongers want him? Okay, take him. I have no use for him anymore. He loved him during the campaign, but now, I don't know. Trump said today, I don't know anything about WikiLeaks. Literally said, I don't know anything about WikiLeaks. This is right-wing, authoritarian fascists trying to criminalize a journalist. The general allegations set forth in paragraph 1 through 13 are realleged and incorporated into this count as they'll fully set forth herein. I'm going to skip over 15. Actually, I'll read it. Beginning on or about March 2nd, 2010, and continuing thereafter until on or about March 10th, 2010, the exact date being unknown to the grand jury, both dates being approximate and inclusive in an offense begun and committed outside of the jurisdiction of any particular state or district of the United States, the defendant, Julian Paul Assange, who will be first brought to the Eastern District of Virginia, did knowingly and intentionally combine, conspire, confederate, oh my God, and agree with other co-conspirators, known and unknown to the grand jury, to commit an offense against the United States, to wit, to knowingly access a computer without authorization and exceeding authorization access, to obtain information that has been determined by the United States government pursuant to an executive order and statute to require protection against unauthorized disclosures. So right there, they're literally putting in plain English that journalists are committing a crime to obtain information that has been determined by the United States government as an unauthorized disclosure. And the key word that they're trying to use there is obtain. Julian Assange did not obtain this information. Julian Assange received this information. Those are two different things. Just like Glenn Greenwald received the information from Edward Snowden. Julian Assange did not hack any computers or databases to then release information. If he did, we'd be having a different discussion. If he allegedly, because I don't see any proof in this indictment, and call me old-fashioned, but I demand proof from the government when they are making an indictment that literally dismantles the First Amendment. Call me extreme for wanting incontrovertible evidence, which is the same thing I said, give me the evidence that Russia hacked the DNC and Podesta, but I'm a Russian agent. Give me the evidence that there was collusion between Trump and the Russia campaign, but I'm a Russian agent. No. Everybody's saying that about me, Jimmy Dore, Aaron Mattei, Glenn Greenwald, Lee Camp, Matt Taibbi, Michael Tracy, Jamal Thomas, Abby Martin, Rania Khalek, Jen, everybody. You are propagandists and public relations officers putting on makeup and going on cable TV. That's all you are. The primary purpose of the conspiracy was to facilitate Manning's acquisition and transmission of classified information related to the national defense of the United States, so that WikiLeaks could publicly disseminate the information on its website. Assange and his co-conspirators used the following ways, manners, and means, among others, to carry out this purpose. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used the Jabber online chat service to collaborate on the acquisition and dissemination of the classified records, and to enter into the agreement to crack the passwords stored on the United States Department of Defense computers connected to the secret Internet Protocol Network. I keep hearing about this agreement, but I don't see any evidence of an agreement. And if there was some type of communication with them, you think that the Trump administration might be taking those words and that conversation out of context to extradite Julian Assange? Is that possible? It was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning took measures to conceal Manning as the source of the disclosure of classified records to WikiLeaks, including by removing usernames from the disclosed information and deleting chat logs between Assange and Manning. Yes, a conspiracy to protect his source, also known as journalism. It was part of the conspiracy that Assange encouraged Manning to provide information and records from departments and agencies of the United States. Encouraging a source to dig further is a crime now in America. As part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used a special folder on a cloud Dropbox of WikiLeaks to transmit classified records containing information related to the national defense of the United States. Okay, so having a Dropbox now, that's a crime. In order to further the goals and purposes of the conspiracy, Assange and his co-conspirators committed overt acts, including but not limited to the following. On or about March 2nd, again, we don't know what day, Manning copied a Linux operating system to a CD to allow Manning to access a United States Department of Defense computer file that was accessible only to users with administrative level privileges. On or about March 8, 2010, Manning provided Assange with part of a password stored on United States Department of Defense computers connected to the secret Internet Protocol network. On or about March 10, 2010, Assange requested more information from Manning related to the password. Assange indicated that he had been trying to crack the password by stating that he had, quote, no luck so far. You want to know how I know they're taking this out of context? You want to know how it's clear that they don't have any real evidence? And probably why the Obama Department of Justice that had this same information, had the same chat logs, but could not find evidence to prosecute and extradite and win against Julian Assange? Because they're taking whole sentences and only plucking 4 words. No luck so far. Well, if Julian Assange literally was saying, I've had no luck so far trying to hack the computer, trying to hack the password, why wouldn't you say the whole sentence? Why wouldn't, if you had these chat logs that were so damning, were so incriminating, that showed Julian Assange was actively working to hack a password to help Chelsea Manning, why can't we see the chat logs in the indictment? I know, a lot of times indictments don't provide all evidence, but maybe just a little? Hope you enjoyed that last video. Hop on over to statuscoup.com where you can sign up for our email list and become a member for as low as $5 to $10 a month. Membership is how we grow. That's statuscoup.com/join. And remember, join our email list so we can grow the revolution with you.